This is Teofimo Lopez, the next big thing in boxing, the takeover, and you're listening to the Ringside Boxing Show.
Live from Monterey on California's beautiful Central Coast, this is the Ringside Boxing Show. I'm Dennis Taylor, welcoming you to join me and my expert analysts, Travis Hartman, Rizwan Zahid, and John J. Responsi today and every week for the hottest, sweatiest show on the West Coast. And now, from Studio 1A, it's the Ringside Boxing Show. Hey, welcome to the Ringside Boxing Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network, where we have a lot of great stuff coming your way again today, including another journey into the Wayback Machine, complement of the world's greatest boxing historian. Short time from now, Christopher James Shelton is going to take us back about 130 years to paint a picture of the boxing world, what it was like in the 1890s, through the story of former heavyweight champion Peter Maher, an Irish pugilist who immigrated to America and fought the biggest names of that era. Chris always comes up with some stuff no other historian finds and also corrects the record on a lot of things we thought were true. Today will be no exception. Before that, our British correspondent Paul McLaughlin will be along to talk about what's going on in the UK with Gillian White, Katie Taylor, and Anthony Joshua. But first, let's talk about the week in boxing with our expert analyst. Travis Hartman's a professional boxer, trainer, and promoter from Osborne, Missouri. He's now living in Orlando, Florida. Rizwan Zahid is a boxing journalist from Toronto. John J. Responsi is chief lead writer for MaxBoxing.com and DogHouseBoxing.com. He's the author of a brand new book you can find on Amazon right now. It's called Blood on My Notebook, Dispatches from the World of Professional Boxing. And John and I are also co-authors of Intimate Warfare, The True Story of the Arturo Gatti and Mickey Ward Boxing Trilogy, an Amazon bestseller. So if you've got a boxing fan in your family, you can order them both online and get your Christmas shopping done right now for that person. And we got John with us right now. We're expecting Rizwan and not sure about Travis. John, Teofimo Lopez versus Richard Commey was supposed to be a tough fight, a pick'em fight. We all thought so. I think most of the boxing pundits out there did. And Lopez obliterated this guy in less than 2 rounds. What kind of a statement did he make, man?
Well, I was thinking about it because sometimes I think we get obviously you made a great statement, but I think what happens is we get wrapped up in the previous fight sometimes. And we think about Commey looked good and Teofimo struggled in his last fight. So we got that on our mind. So we think, well, that means that maybe it's going to happen again. So we get a little bit confused there. We don't think about styles because that's really what makes boxing is styles. And I obviously gave Lopez the edge, but I didn't think he was going to do what he did. But after I thought about it for a while, I thought, well, yeah, in a sense, Commey's made for him because he's right there. But the other thing is Teofimo seems to have got his life together. And when we discussed with his life, he seems to be talk about the takeover. He seems to be taking over his life in a lot of ways, and that's good. He's growing up, but you could see in the first round, even though Commey might have had the edge, that he wasn't the same guy. He was sharp. He was there. He was focused. Everything was different about him, and he did the job. But it was electrifying because that right hand that he hit Commey with, man, that was a huge one. And it was funny when they talked to Lomachenko afterwards. Lomachenko was like, "Well, I don't know what happened," and I'm thinking, come on, man, you know what happened. He just knocked him out. He knocked him out. I mean, come on, Lomachenko. I mean, he's always a nice guy, and he's always a good guy, but I found that kind of funny that he said that. Okay, maybe he meant, wow, I didn't expect that. Okay, that's true. We really didn't expect that, but still, man, the kid made a huge statement, Dennis, and he was obviously more than impressive, and you could even see Commey was like, wow, did you get the number of that bus that hit me? I don't even know what that was. So, that was really exciting. And in his story is, again, a very dramatic one, as is Commey's. And I was kind of happy for the kid. We've had him on the show. He's a nice kid. We know that. We've interviewed him a few times. Found out a lot more about his father, so I kind of understand his father's rage. And Teofimo, it's the ultimate story. This was his dream, and he did it last night, so you couldn't help but be not only touched, but very impressed. And he, no matter what happens with Lomachenko, he is a hell of a fighter. I don't think there was any doubt about that anyway, but he cemented it last night.
Riz is with us now. Riz, what did you think of Teofimo last night? Were you surprised that he took care of Commey as easily as he did?
I mean, I think yes, some part of me yes, part of me no. The part of me that's yes is Commey could have easily been undefeated. His only 2 losses were both split decisions. Many people thought he was kind of robbed in both of those. And the other thing is, this is the first time you kind of saw him hurt. The other side of this, though, is that, like John kind of alluded to it, he's right there. He's right there to be hit, right? I mean, I think, in Teofimo Lopez, I think what you saw more than anything else from him is that it's not just power. He has good boxing skill. He is an Olympian, right? So that doesn't happen unless you have decent skill. That doesn't necessarily translate. But John also made a good point. You're only as good as your last fight. I mean, we all went from this guy's overrated to this is going to be a close fight to now saying, not everyone thinks this, but some people are saying maybe he has a chance against Lomachenko. It's just crazy how the narrative can change so quickly. And again, what surprised me more than anything else is I looked at some of the other guys he fought over the last couple of years and who he's knocked out. None of those guys were necessarily, guys with sturdy chins, right? So I wasn't, I wasn't sure how well his power was going to show in a fight like this. But what you saw was, guys like Mason Menard has been knocked out by everyone, right? Other guys he fought have, been knocked down or hurt or passed or whatever. This fight, though, you saw his power is real. And how he landed it. Now, Commey, I was kind of disappointed in because, he got locked to the left hook about 30 seconds before that. And then the knockout, any good boxer is able to land that right hand because that was 4 very, very lazy jabs thrown by Commey. So any sturdy fighter with some sort of boxing, like Olympian pedigree, is going to be able to nail that shot, right? Commey's tough, rough brawler. So, part of me says that Teofimo Lopez has shown that he has skills and he has power, and therefore I think he has a fighter's chance against Lomachenko. I think it is actually it is a fight I think should happen. But the other side is, does Commey resemble anything that Lomachenko will resemble in a ring? And I think that's the difference. And Lomachenko's reaction was actually pretty great because. He said, "Okay, welcome to my club." And I saw when he was standing in the ring, he had a smile on his face. Lomachenko, I think he's happy because I think he wants to be motivated for a big fight like this, right? In addition to the money and whatever else, this is a fight that gets him energetic, right? So we could see a lot of things happen in that fight. I wouldn't be surprised if Lomachenko just schools him and says, look, you're an Olympian. I'm a 2-time gold medalist. There's a difference. But the other thing is, and this has to be mentioned, there's going to be a serious size advantage for Lopez on fight night. Against with Linares, and other guys Lomachenko's fought, he's been the smaller guy. And I think this is one of those fights where you're going to look back at that Linares knockdown and think that could have been the best thing for Lomachenko's career. Because that was a moment where his cockiness got the better of him. I don't think he's going to do that against Lopez. I think his cockiness is going to show by skill. Because as great as Lomachenko is, we haven't seen we've seen I don't know if this makes sense, but the routine greatness from some of his fights, right? Like against Luke Campbell, he looked great, but we expected him to look great. It wasn't the Rigondeaux or Nicholas Walters fight where you thought, hey, this could be a close fight. And then he just shuts that notion down. So I think he's kind of happy about that. But arguably, this is a fight that has to be made now, right? This is a great fight for both sides. And I guess you guys are probably going to talk about this next. But Lomachenko must be thrilled because here's a guy he doesn't have to go searching for to fight, right? Where Crawford, on the other end, Crawford has this issue of getting a legitimate contender in the ring with him due to politics and networks and everything else. Lomachenko doesn't have that problem. So that must be nice for everyone involved there, that they can have a big fight that they want, and there's no issues with, dealing with another promoter. And they can pretty much, like Lomachenko said, all right, see you in April. Like, it's almost already set, and that just makes things a lot easier, and that should make for, a seamless transition to actually making the fight. It should be probably a pay-per-view, and it looks like we probably have our first big fight, or second big fight, aside from Fury and Wilder. It looks like we have the second big fight set for the first 4 months of next year. So, but you can see on Lomachenko's face, he said, all right, like, he had a smile on his face, like, hey, kid, good performance. All right, step into the big leagues now. And I think Andre Ward alluded to that too. There's levels to this game, right? I mean, Lopez, great performance. You couldn't have done any better. Lomachenko doesn't necessarily represent what Comey's going to bring, though. Now, Lopez, can he hurt Lomachenko? Absolutely, if he lands a shot. That's a big if, though, right? He's not Wilder, who will eventually land a shot against guys who don't have this Olympic pedigree. So what's interesting more than anything else is Lomachenko's intrigued. And I think when Lomachenko is intrigued and he's motivated, that's a scary guy to be against.
Okay, John, Teofimo against Lomachenko. What kind of a threat is Teofimo now, based on what you saw last night?
Well, there you go. We're going on his last performance, and Riz made an excellent point that, it was Richard Commey. Richard Commey and Vasyl Lomachenko are not the same guy. Lomachenko is faster, smarter, quicker. He's got the pedigree. He's in the big leagues, like they said. That was a good point by Lomachenko. He said, hey, okay, fine, let's do this. Lopez obviously has got more than a chance because he's young, he's enthused, he's quick also, so he could tag him. But I really like what Riz said, because I completely agree. I think when you get to be a Lomachenko or any really, really good fighter or great fighter, motivation can be a problem. And I've read so many books about them, and that's true. As you get older, even though Lomachenko, as we know, hasn't had a lot of pro fights, he's been fighting a long time. So you know that he has to get bored sometimes. So this kind of fight will inspire him and his father to work even harder, which seems outrageous. But I think he knows that he has to. He has to work really hard in this fight because this kid is a threat. So we're going to see. I didn't think Lomachenko looked great against Luke Campbell. I disagree there. I thought he looked pretty good. I thought he actually got tagged with some punches that he usually doesn't. But and he was motivated for that one too. But this one he was really motivated for. So because you remember when the Lopezes were talking, Lomachenko was saying, "Who are these guys? What are they saying all this stuff for?" So I think they might have got under, not him. I think the senior might have got under Lomachenko's skin a little bit then. So he's got a double motivation going, which and I wrote this in an article. I mean, I said, be careful what you wish for. They've been talking about wanting Lomachenko. Okay, well now you got him. Mm-hmm. So let's see. Yep. So, and you got a motivated Lomachenko. Maybe we shouldn't have talked so much about it, but then again, that's kind of the way it is nowadays. A lot of times that gets you the attention, sometimes gets you the fight. So I love the fight. I think there are so many angles. There, the older guy and the younger guy, obviously the cliche, but not just that. We've got Teofimo's story. We got Lomachenko's story. We got the ultimate professional, the young kid. Lomachenko obviously has an edge. I completely agree with Andre Ward. There are levels, and you see it, and Teofimo will feel it immediately in the first round. He will be feeling, okay, I'm fighting this guy. He's a little guy and all that, but he'll see right away that Lomachenko, with all the quickness in his foot speed, will show him things, even though he's going to be preparing, that he's going to be like, whoa. So he'll see that immediately. So I love the fight. I can't wait. I wish it was sooner than April. Like I said, Teofimo definitely has a shot, but he's going to find out really quick about the big leagues, and I definitely will make Lomachenko just right now, and it'll stay this way, because Lomachenko is Lomachenko. Lomachenko will be the favorite, going in, but this is going to be a great build-up. And we got to have the Lopez's on, maybe one of them on again, and let them talk about this, because they're really excited, because this is what they've wanted since they turned pro. So this ought to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, man, you guys are so right. It's gonna be so exciting, anticipating seeing the best fighter, the best boxer in the world, motivated. To show that he's the best. Because maybe we haven't seen that yet. We haven't seen him at his absolute greatest. We may see him that night in April. That's going to be really, really fun. Okay, Terence Crawford got pushed pretty hard for about 6 rounds in ESPN's main event on Saturday. Even got knocked down by undefeated Egidijus Kavaliauskas, although the referee ruled it as a slip. And then he scored a knockdown of his own in the 7th round and finished Kavaliauskas with 2 more knockdowns in the 9th round. Riz, was Crawford off his game against this guy, or was Kavaliauskas a lot better than people anticipated?
It's just me, or Crawford looked a little out of shape. I don't think he was in Andy Ruiz shape, but I don't think he was in elite shape. He looked even towards the end, actually, in that 8th or 9th round, he was breathing pretty heavily. I mean, I think he just wanted to get his guy out of there, but because I think at that point the quote-unquote mean machine didn't pose much of a threat. But yeah, Crawford to me just I don't know if unmotivated was the right word, but he definitely didn't look great. And that was definitely a knockdown. I don't know how that was ruled a slip or whatever it was, but that was definitely a knockdown. And this is where I talk about here. I mean, Crawford's saying, I don't need to call out names and this and that, but Crawford's really a no man's land. He's 32 years old. He's not a kid anymore, in this game. So, when you look at the guys on quote unquote the other side, Crawford yesterday showed 0 head movement, and that's definitely a hole in his game. He doesn't really always opt for using his skill set and avoiding shots as best as he could. So, I look at the other side. If Spence was in the ring that last night, right, and I understand that Crawford probably would have taken the fight a little more seriously, but, that shot that the Mean Machine hit, if Spence lands that, that's it, right? I mean, the Mean Machine, clearly he's a big guy. I think he's a former Olympian too. He's clearly a powerful guy. But, his strategy, he had plan A and that was it. And it's very predictable. It was, I'm going to wait till you miss it. I'm just going to explode. And he just Ward was really on his game last night, but he said he had his feet planted, and that's when he was just waiting, and then he saw shots, and then he threw. A little similar to what Ruiz caught Joshua. But to me, this didn't scream. It was a nice ending, but I don't think anyone's going to call this a great performance, right? Mandatories are. The reason for mandatories are obvious, right? I mean, it is a way for guys to really break through and get their chance. And so I'm definitely on board for mandatories. I don't think a guy who's fighting a mandatory should then only fight one other time throughout the year, though. That to me doesn't make sense. Because, for every 10 mandatories, there's that 1 or 2 who pull off the upset or who'll gather attention and move up the ranks, right? And that's, there's a certain amount of parity that comes with it. But, I'm looking at, it's funny. It's so much determined by which side you're on here. When I look at Lopez and Lomachenko, arguably when they fight each other in April, whenever it happens, that will be the best opponent either has faced, maybe. And that, to me, either of those guys are still better than any opponent Crawford has faced so far. Top Rank is really, and the broadcast team is obviously saying, yes, he's the pound-for-pound number 1 guy. And again, he passes the eye test for sure. But if you look at, it's Crawford's really a no man's land. I mean, look at the 2 fights he's had this year. It's against Amir Khan and a mandatory. And Amir Khan is, this is not the Amir Khan of 5 years ago even, right? This is Amir Khan who's really past it, right? I mean, he hasn't really looked good since the Danny Garcia loss, and that was, I think, at least 4 or 5 years ago. So it's been a while, right? And if you look at, Crawford's top wins, I'm going to say Khan, just in terms of name. Indongo was a great performance, obviously, but Prograis did that, a fight later in a round less. And maybe Gamboa, and Gamboa's fighting,
Gamble wasn't young at the time either, and Gamble was fighting at 135 still, and Crawford's now at 147. So clearly there was a serious size advantage there too. And when you look at that division, even Prograis fighting Josh Taylor, both of those guys fought each other in the Super 6 finals. So both of those guys have already went through tougher tests and tougher opponents than Crawford has. So I can't get on board with the pound for pound number one guy when so many other fighters are taking risks and fighting better competition. We all know my criticism of Canelo, but he can't control the scorecards here, but Canelo still fought Golovkin twice. Canelo still moved up 2 divisions. I mean, and it was a total cherry pick against Kovalev, but and even if you look back well before, Canelo's fought much tougher opponents. Where Crawford really hasn't had that. I can't think of a fight Crawford's been in when he hasn't been the heavy favorite, and that's a problem, right? You can't really be the number one guy until you are, until you're fighting the best in the division. I think that's all it comes down to. Has Crawford fought the best in his division? And I think it's a resounding no. And I don't think he's even fought the top 5 guys in his division. Where Prograis and Taylor already has. Lomachenko arguably has. Teofimo Lopez, I think, arguably has already by at least capturing, a title. And Richard Commey, a guy who was, his styles make fights, of course, but could have been undefeated, and he's going to be fighting Lomachenko next. So again, there's a level of competition, and Lomachenko said he wants to fight Lopez, and then later in the year fight Gervonta Davis. So there's already, there's still a and it's funny, you just hear the different answers, right? Lomachenko didn't say, I'll leave it up to my promoter. He didn't say, I'll leave it, those guys were on that. He didn't say any of that, right? Where Crawford wasn't really willing to say that, he wants Spence or he wants Porter. Top Rank and Bob Arum has said Porter is likely next. I think that's a very good fight for both guys. For Porter, I think arguably, he is a top 5 guy and he deserves that next major fight. And I hope he fights similar to the way he fought Spence, because we've said this about, both guys, both Crawford and Spence have dogs in them. But we said that about Porter. You might beat Porter, but you're going to go through hell doing it, right? The pressure he puts on you have to be in phenomenal shape. The Crawford we saw last night, I don't think would have beat Porter, the Porter that fought Spence, because he didn't look in great shape. Again, I fully expect him to clean that up when he fights a higher level opponent. But you have to wonder how much motivation is still there when you're fighting a B+ guys if you're an A talent. And that's how upsets happen, right? And that's why there's a moment in that fight yesterday where we thought, could we be seeing an upset? Now the difference is, I don't think the quote unquote mean machine is all that great. He was very, very lucky to get a draw against Ray Robinson, and that's not Sugar Ray either. And Crawford was like a 20-1 favorite. He didn't fight like a 21-1 favorite at all, right? Where arguably Teofimo Lopez probably fought like the 20-1 favorite. So Crawford is, I think his career is in a more stuck state, I think, more than ever. Because this year alone, he fought 2 guys against, and no one thought, there was a remote chance of an upset. They were not competitive fights on paper. And one of them, he got rocked and arguably knocked down in the 3rd round. So if you look at this year and you ask yourself, is this a successful year for Terence Crawford? I'm going to say it's a resounding no. Where guys like Porter and Spence and other guys in and around those divisions, I would say, yeah, those guys had success, right? Prograis, even in a loss, I think he accomplished a lot this year, right? Super 6 finals and a close decision. I think that's a success story. Porter losing to Errol Spence when he had him where it was kind of neck and neck through 8 or 9 rounds, I think that's a successful year. I don't think anyone's going to say Terence Crawford has a successful year, wins the side.
John, what's your take on Crawford last night and also Crawford Porter possibility?
See, I don't think Crawford was tired. I think that what we've been talking about earlier was the main point. I just don't think he was as focused as he normally would be. I think he was bored, like we were saying before. This was a mandatory. Everyone was telling him that this was going to be an easy fight. Now, I don't know that, but that was what a lot of people thought because that was the storyline. Wow, this was a harder fight than we all thought. I mean, it's like anything. You read your own publicity or you hear your own publicity. If you hear the negative publicity, maybe you back off a little bit. But I think he's also frustrated. He's with a Hall of Fame promoter, a guy that has guided a lot of people to a lot of great fights, and he can't get the fights he wants. See, I don't blame him in a sense. What's he supposed to do? Is he going to sue Bob Arum to get out of his contract? Well, then we wouldn't see him for a few years. He'd be stuck in court. We know that. I think he wants to fight. Obviously wants to fight Errol Spence if Errol ever comes back. And a Sean Porter fight is a good one. That's more what we're talking about here. But that version of Crawford last night, as much as they were raving on ESPN about it, that was, and this is what I mean about being bored. I don't think he was all there as far as mentally in that fight. I think he got stubborn about what he wanted to do because he made it a lot harder on himself. And he got hit with punches, and I've seen him get hit with punches before that he shouldn't get hit with. His defense is pretty good, but it's not as solid as I think since he's such an elite fighter that it should be. But he got clipped with some right hands and a good one, and that was definitely a knockdown, no doubt about it. It was bogus that they didn't call it. But he wasn't sluggish. But like I said, I think it's just my theory. I think he was there like anything. You know, you go to work and you're putting it in, but you know you're not 100% committed like you normally would be, and I don't think he was. I think he was surprised by the Mean Machine a little bit, and then that's why he started to get so determined, and he was like I thought about later, like he got annoyed that he did that and go, okay, game on now. Okay, I see you got a little bit of game. Now I'm going to show you that you don't have enough game to beat me, and he had to dig down a little bit. So that part about Crawford, gritty, competitive as hell. I keep saying mean in there. Maybe call him the Mean Machine. He did it. He did his job. He stopped him. He could taste when the Mean Machine was hurt. But what I mean about stubbornness too is I couldn't understand why he kept fighting southpaw when he kept getting hit with right hand. I mean, I understood it in the beginning because that's his game. But when it wasn't necessarily working, he like stubbornly stuck with it, and then he finally switched around round 6 or round 7. I mean, why not switch around round 3 or round 4? Why wait and keep getting hit with these punches? So that's what I mean. I just thought there was a little bit of stubbornness going on, and they alluded to that on ESPN, and Bradley and Andre Ward ought to know. I mean, they were both stubborn fighters. Remember Bradley against Provodnikov? Nobody wanted him to fight that way except him. And he was being yelled at by his trainer, Diaz, and he just kept rumbling with Provodnikov because he was tired of all the criticism about the Pacquiao fight. So he just went his own way, and Andre Ward will admit that maybe he didn't fight Kovalev the smartest way he could have, but he wanted to prove something. So I get that. So it was not an A performance by Crawford. I disagree with some of the people who have been saying, that cements his pound for pound, and they said on ESPN. I don't agree. I think he might have fallen down a notch. If he was tied with Lomachenko, I would put Lomachenko back up there now. He shouldn't really struggle with these guys, a guy like the Mean Machine, but he can't be that good every night. And his year, I agree with Riz, his year has been not a good year for him because he's not getting the big fights. But again, what does he do? This is the question. What does he do? Does he go to the media and start screaming, give me the big fights? He says that every time. I'm going to repeat myself here. Does he sue Bob Arum? Well, then we won't see him. What does he do? So, I mean, I don't know what his contract is with Bob Arum. If it expired after this fight, pure speculation on my part, I have no idea. Then that would probably be a good idea to join the zone or something because Eddie Hearn or whatever, he seems to be the guy that gets the fight. So, and if I'm Bob Arum speculating here, he's got to be frustrated too because he knows Crawford wants the big fights. Now, forgetting all that, if it's true that Crawford is going to fight Sean Porter, that's a good fight. I love that fight. Porter will push him. He will do everything he can to win, and he'll have a chance to win if that Crawford shows up from last night, which I seriously doubt. But I like that fight, and it's about time that Crawford is in a big fight in a sense, not a huge one, but a damn good one because we know Porter gave Errol Spence hell. So I like the fight. I obviously make Crawford a little bit of a favorite, but I hope that happens just for Crawford because, like I said, I think the guy is sincere, Dennis and Riz. He wants the big fight. But wanting them and getting them are two different things.
Tyson Fury, we all just saw the report that he's in the process of replacing Ben Davison with a veteran trainer to be named, only about 9 weeks before the Deontay rematch. On the one hand, I'm not surprised because Davison took an awful lot of heat after Fury got knocked down by Wilder in that last round of their first fight when he was way ahead on the cards. On the other hand, man, it's pretty close to the Wilder fight to make that kind of adjustment. Riz, where do you come down on this one?
I really don't know. I'm just curious why now, right? The timing is interesting. You're talking about like 2 months before the fight. So why all of a sudden? I mean, he hasn't fought in a couple months, so why the delay? Seems like there's a difference in strategy or difference of opinion. One of you guys said could be Tyson Fury's father getting in his ear, which is also a possibility. Because I don't think there was anything in that, in the first Wilder fight that his trainer did anything wrong. John brought up a good point, though. I mean, I don't think at this point you're really going to teach Fury all that much. So I'm curious what the reason for the change is. I mean, as in terms of your style and what you're planning to do. I mean, you're still planning to do the same thing, right? You're still planning to outbox Wilder. So I don't know. I don't know the purpose of this and why now. Something I assume must have happened, but I also wonder what's going to come of this and who they end up going with. They said they're looking, I think, for a veteran trainer. So I think someone just to finer points of things. I think Jonathan Banks would be good, especially with his history with Klitschko and his history with actually Deontay Wilder's been in Klitschko's camp before, so I'll be interested to see who they end up going with, but also what kind of strategy end up implementing, because I don't think there's anything, even from the first fight, I don't think there's anything that really either fighter is going to change all that much, right? Wilder's probably just going to be a little more selective, and Fury's just going to try to be in a little better conditioning to sustain the 12 rounds. Other than that, I can't really see that fight going any differently. I mean, both guys have clear objectives, and I think that's what's really going to happen. But so I don't know how much of another trainer is going to help that. There's got to be a reason for it. I just don't know. I don't know what happened to cause this now, because the timing is really peculiar.
John, I'm going to change subjects on you right here because I know you got to run here pretty quick. Mikey Garcia just agreed to a one-fight deal with an option for a second fight, I guess, with DAZN. And that likely takes him out of the Pacquiao sweepstakes. He was on the short list of 3 fighters to fight Pacquiao. This really surprises me because fighting Pacquiao is like winning the lottery for a fighter nowadays. And the report says that Mikey's opponent for this DAZN fight might be Jesse Vargas. What could Eddie Hearn have offered Mikey Garcia to make him take this deal and get pulled off the Pacquiao 3-man short list?
Boy, that's a good question, and I'm going to come back.
Isn't
to
it?
I gotta say something about the Fury thing. I feel bad for Ben Davison. I do, guys, because you remember he got a lot of credit for pulling Fury, and Fury did it himself too, obviously, out of the scrap heap. Fury was in hell. He was over 300 pounds, and Davison believed in him, told him how good he is, blah blah blah, and then he gets bounced. He gets fired a few months before arguably Fury's biggest fight of his career, one of the biggest fights of his career, and he was at the Wilder-Ortiz fight. So there's no way that he would have been there if he had been fired. So something just happened. I think it was an abrupt decision, an impulsive decision, again, just my opinion, in the Fury camp, and I really believe that it was outside pressures that got to Fury, and somebody telling him, look, you need somebody, an old pro in there. I think it was more a strategy thing, to be honest. I think that's what Freddie Roach was complaining about, which was silly, and I didn't like it that Freddie did that. I thought that was uncouth and uncool to do that to a fellow trainer. Even though Ben Davison didn't have the experience of some of these guys, he'd done a phenomenal job with Fury. So I think that was pretty crappy, that the way this guy is being treated. It is an interesting one. If I was Mikey Garcia, hell yes, I want to fight Pacquiao. Not only do I think I can win that fight, but look at all the money I'm most likely going to make. So maybe Mikey didn't really want to fight Manny Pacquiao. Maybe he was unsure. You know, Mikey goes the way Mikey goes. So maybe he was like, well, yeah, I do, but if you're going to give me all this money to fight Jesse Vargas, who might be an easier fight, which is debatable, and then I have an option for a second fight with you, man, I'm going to go that way. Maybe Pacquiao will still be around then, but that's a big speculation because, you know, Manny's going to be 41 here pretty soon. So, yeah, it's a puzzler. I was surprised by that, too. There have been so many opponents talked about with Manny. He's running out of opponents in a sense because Errol Spence came up again, but then we just heard Bob Arum say that he confirmed pretty much that Errol Spence is not doing that well, which is terrible, just terrible. All our best out to Errol. And I don't know. I don't know who Manny Pacquiao is going to fight. If they talked about Sean Porter, now Porter might fight Crawford. So there's people are running away from Manny, not necessarily important when it's not personal, but you would think they'd be running to him because of all the money that they could be getting. But I don't know. I want to hear what Mikey says about it to get some kind of an explanation. I don't know if we'll get necessarily the truthful explanation about what was going on, but I do want to hear what he says, and I wonder what Manny Pacquiao was thinking. Like, wow, I had at least a couple of fights here set up. Now I don't know where I'm going. So, yeah, very interesting, Dennis, and kind of puzzling because it looks like Mikey wanted all the top guys and all the money that he could make. And here's a chance, we don't know how far the negotiations were, but if they were really close to settling on Pacquiao was actually more close to accepting Mikey as an opponent. Why suddenly pull the rug out from under him and go somewhere else? You're right. The Zone opened up the bank book, I guess, and offered him. Maybe he thinks, well, the two fights with them, if he gets the second fight, really get a lot of money. So, I don't know. We'll have to see. Kind of surprising.
Yep, sure is. You guys both got something going on today, so we'll cut it a little bit short today. But I also want to point out to you guys, I want to brag a little bit. We had Teofimo Lopez on our show a few weeks ago, and I predicted that he would strike the Heisman Trophy pose in the ring if he beat Commey. He just giggled, but that's exactly what he did last night. Did I make an accurate prediction, or did I give Teofimo the idea? I guess we'll never know. So there you go. Rizwan Zahid, John J. Risponti, the Marvel superheroes of boxing analysis. Well done, guys. As always, have a great week. Thank you. Appreciate it.
You too. Take care.
All right. And we're going to go across the pond next to find out what's going on in the UK from Paul McLaughlin, our inimitable Brit. That's coming right up. This is the Ringside Boxing Show. Do not go away.
If you like the Ringside Boxing Show, you're going to love the website, ringsideboxingshow.com.
Hi there, it's Paul McLaughlin with your weekly roundup of everything going on in the UK boxing scene. At the moment, we start off with Dillian Whyte, whose suspension has been lifted by the WBC after he was cleared by Anti-Doping UK last week. The British heavyweight is reinstated as WBC interim champion and will receive a mandatory shot at the full title currently held by Deontay Wilder, but not until February 2021. Whyte has been ranked at number one by the governing body since October 2017, but has never received an opportunity at a world championship, which is a bit of a disgrace. Somebody else who is very annoyed by all of this is Tony Bellew.
I know the man who tarnished Dillian Whyte in India, a disgrace. Because no one's ever said no drug organisation, no drug testing organisation, no UCAD, no. Father actually backed Dillian Whyte in his case and said that he couldn't possibly have been on drugs to have passed our more stringent test 3 days before. And I knew this in the background. That's why I stood by him, because I knew he took a test 3 days previously by Varda, and there's no one more stringent to testing than Varda. If I see a matchroom fighter fail to test the steroids, I'll say you're a scumbag. Okay, I'll say it's going to box again. But I'm not going to see a man have his name tarnished by a journalist who's gone off hearsay. He didn't fail a drug test. The man who tarnished him, you should be ashamed of yourself.
Elsewhere, Katie Taylor's hopes of a rematch with Delphine Pearsoon are fading after reports that the Belgian will compete as an amateur at the Olympic Games. The Irish fighter Taylor earned a narrow win over Pearsoon in June to unify all 4 lightweight world titles. But Pearsoon made a formal complaint over the controversial decision of the judges, and Taylor wanted a rematch in 2020 to basically shut everyone up. It's reported that Pearsoon will reclassify as an amateur on the 1st of January 2020. So that fight looks like it will not happen at all. And finally, Anthony Joshua's next title defense against Kubrat Pulev or Alexander Usyk is set to be decided, with the IBF and WBO expected to agree a ruling in the coming days. Promoter Eddie Hearn revealed how Pulev could be the forerunner for Joshua as the IBF's mandatory challenger after Britain's heavyweight star regained his IBF, WBO and WBA titles with a rematch win over Andy Ruiz Jr. in Saudi Arabia. So, where does the future lie for Anthony Joshua?
Anyone can get it. You know, the resume shows you that, but I feel like I'll be keen to handle my mandatories because the current WBC champion is fighting with Tyson Fury. So good luck to them both, man. That's another exciting fight for the division. And then in the meantime, I'll handle my mandatories, which I have to do, or I'm going to vacate a belt. And I've just worked hard to get them. I don't want to give them away. If you want to take it, you have to earn it. So whoever's on that list, I'll be ready to fight come around March time. But I'm not even looking too far into the future anymore, because what that does for me, what I've learned, is that it takes your eyes off the steps in front of you. So if I just go step by step, by the time I get to unification, I would have been like well ready, and it would be well in front of me, rather than being at point A and I'm looking at point G. I'm just going to go over all my steps, all my processes, knock them down one by one, and then when the big boys are ready, you know, Britain's here waiting to become the next undisputed champion of the world. And I put my fist to the air because I really want to make that happen.
Right, that's your lot from me, guys. I'll be back next week with some more UK boxing news. In the meantime, gloves up and protect yourselves at all times. Back to the studio.
That's Paul McLaughlin, all the way from jolly old England. Much appreciated, as always, Paul. Great job. Next up, we're going to go back 130 years with Christopher James Shelton, our superb boxing historian. That's 1 minute away. We will see you then. Don't go away.
I'm Dennis Taylor, co-author of the Amazon bestseller Intimate Warfare, the true story of the Arturo Gatti and Mickey Ward boxing trilogy. You know, writing this book was a labor of love for John J. Responti and myself. We enjoyed every minute of the process and considered it a privilege to tell the tale of one of the most electrifying boxing trilogies in the history of this sport. Intimate Warfare traces the collision course of Arturo Gatti and Mickey Ward from their earliest days through their 3 epic fights, as well as the aftermath of this great rivalry, which culminated in one of the greatest friendships in boxing. Intimate Warfare has received a 4.5-star rating from readers and was endorsed by Hall of Famers Harold Letterman and Joe Cortez and 2-time Trainer of the Year Virgil Hunter. Our foreword was written by Ray Boom Boom Mancini, another one of the greatest blood and guts fighters of our time. Get your copy today at Amazon.com.
I am the champion. I am the champion. No time for losers, 'cause I am the champion of the world.
Welcome back to the Ringside Boxing Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network, where we are joined once again by the official boxing historian of our podcast. Been with us about 10 years. Christopher James Shelton is going to tell us the story today of an Irish boxer named Peter Maher, who became the heavyweight champion of the world in 1890 and had a very colorful life and career. Maher became the first and only gloved Irish boxing champion, then immigrated to America to face many of the big names of his era, including Bob Fitzsimmons, Joe Goddard, George Godfrey, Joe Kowinski, Philadelphia Jack O'Brien, Tom Sharkey, Kid McCoy, many others. Chris, welcome back, my friend. Once again, we are traveling way back in time, this time about 130 years, to an era that has become one of your favorites to write about. Why do you think you're so enamored with the sport and its characters in the late 19th and early 20th century?
Well, I guess because it's the transformation from bare knuckle to gloves, and it's a little more complicated sometimes than other historians portray. And the 1890s are an interesting period because it became so popular in America, and a little more emphasis on defense and what they call the science of boxing and such, though that stuff always existed. And then the characters stand out. I seem to be writing about the same people. I've told people that I've written more about John L. Sullivan and know more about him than most of my family members. So that's kind of the period I'm
most of his family members.
Most of his family members too. So yeah, it's a fun period, and then to discuss the only Irish heavyweight gloved champion. It's sort of surprising that there's one and only one thus far.
Yeah, who was Peter Maher, and why did he become a focus for you?
Well, he's an interesting person to describe on the heavyweight championship, and a lot of it came from the sort of scandal that we'll talk about later. But I had always heard about Floyd Patterson being the first person to regain the heavyweight championship, and it's simply not true. Bob Fitzsimmons was the first person to do it, but that sort of mixture and racing of history has really fallen on Maher, because if you believe that Floyd Patterson was the first person to regain the championship, that means Maher was never heavyweight champion, though he was heavyweight champion. So yeah, I think that trying to clarify a scandal has really only tangled things worse, and that the best thing to do is just tell the truth. And telling the truth doesn't necessarily lead to well, it does. It leads to the right outcome, not the best outcome, but the right outcome. And the right outcome is Peter Maher, for better or worse, was a heavyweight champion.
Chris, what kind of a place was Ireland for a boxer when Maher began his career?
Well, Ireland is a boxing area, so it wasn't difficult for Maher to find boxing bouts in Dublin, especially. He's from Tuam, if I'm saying it correctly. Ireland is a smaller community, around 4,000 people, a little less, mild, sort of cold, especially for me if I'm from Phoenix, Arizona. Anything's going to seem mild and cold. But lots of green, which, I come from desert, so it looks beautiful to me. And there was soccer, football. There was old cathedrals and such, and such a history. I mean, if we go back to American history, 250 years ago, we weren't even a country, and yet Ireland can go back hundreds of years beyond that and still have remnants of that Peter Maher would walk through. That it seems so far back, and yet 250 years ago is farther back than Peter Maher is, only about 100 and some odd years back. So it seems like I'm talking about a long time ago, but that's really a perception of history and time.
Chris, I was reading about this guy a little bit yesterday, and he was nicknamed the Irish Giant. Any insight why he got that nickname? What were his vital statistics?
His vital statistics were he's just under 6 feet tall. He fought generally between 175 to 185 pounds. And these nicknames, they're always interesting because I read about them too. And you look at a boxer, they say this is their nickname. But you saw Sullivan's nickname often in the stories. You really don't see a nickname attached to Maher throughout the actual newspapers of its time. Maher, was popular in Ireland and certainly popular in America, but generally they would just mention the names themselves. They would not, like I would say, Gentleman Jim Corbett, but rarely when you look at a newspaper printing of any sort did they actually call him Gentleman anything. And the same with Maher. They usually just would call him by the name and very few nicknames. Okay, so
Maher immigrated to America, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in 1891, October of 1891. Describe what Pittsburgh was like at that time, and what was boxing like in the 1890s?
Well, Pennsylvania was an area for boxing. It's hard to understand why somebody would move to Pittsburgh. You might have had family members and such, because Pittsburgh itself, when you read about it, doesn't appear to be a city that you want to immigrate to. It's a hard town if that's where you're from. If you're trying to escape, you're going to work one of these probably steel type jobs, and it's very difficult. The housing was difficult for families. There were monopolies at the time that really squeezed the family. There were poor working conditions. There were lots of people trying to organize unions, and the monopolists trying to destroy them and destroy the people that lived there. So Maher did come from Ireland as a middleweight champion, and fought well. He fought in London, developed a further reputation in Europe, so he took that to America and fought well in Pennsylvania and fought also in New York City, and continued to build his reputation at what would become sort of an early first-round knockout artist. He wasn't absolutely that way in Ireland, but in America, he was scoring these first-round knockouts that some had a little suspicion to him because it seemed like there was an attempt to build a name, which, hey, that's what we do. We all try to build a name, So there was a sort of a thought, is he really a name or a hype, or is he the real deal? But certainly he could hit hard, and often did in the early part of his career. And again, why somebody moved to Pittsburgh at that time, it would seem like an unlikely place to be, though Andrew Carnegie had become a philanthropic, so he had the first library in Pittsburgh by the time Maher arrived. He was going to build a terrific art museum while Maher was living there. And so Pittsburgh was definitely becoming culturally sophisticated, and maybe it was growing in a way that someone like Maher would see, or again, perhaps he had just relatives there.
Okay, so it sounds like he was a slugger. How would you describe his pugilistic style? Was he more of a brawler than a boxer?
He was a brawler rather than a boxer, and for really the time 1880, before he was the bare knuckle heavyweight champion, John L. Sullivan had taken over America as a slugger, and that really become the popularized form. Now, he was taken out by James Corbett in 1892, and the way the newspapers described it was the thinking boxer versus the old slugger. Of course, Sullivan, was a prematurely old age 34, which is old in itself, but Sullivan didn't train well, and he drank too much, and simply Corbett signed everything to work to his advantage for a 25-round bout. But people basically read in shock. It was a 21st-round knockout of John L. Sullivan, and Corbett was the new brilliant defensive pugilist, along with Joe Kowinski of left jabs, a lot of patience, so that became sort of the new style in America, and people were really, interested in this new scientific type of boxing, and Mayer was the opposite of that. He really just wanted to go in there and throw hard punches. He hit both equally hard with the left and right. His right was probably, a little bit harder of a punch. He wasn't really a jabber, so it appeared to be a little bit more old school Sullivan at a time when that was not the popular form within America at the heavyweight ranks.
Okay, so he fought a trilogy against an Australian heavyweight named Joe Goddard. Tell us about Goddard. Who was this guy?
Well, Goddard was the Australian heavyweight champion, which may be a little bit like winning the Australian Open in tennis. It's not terribly respected by Americans, but at the same time, he was a good fighter. He knocked out Joe Kowinski when Kowinski went to Australia twice. He landed a draw with Peter Jackson, the great colored heavyweight champion. So he was a very good fighter who did come to America to see if he could land the heavyweight championship. And it just didn't quite go his way when all said and done for winning the championship. He eventually landed his opportunity against James Jeffrey a little late in his career and didn't fare well, a third-round knockout victim. But he's one of those fighters that would have had a chance really at a championship. But Corbett, from the time he won the championship against Sullivan in 1892 to the time he retired in 1896, he only fought one time. It was a three-rounder against Charlie Mitchell, who had lost to Sullivan a couple of times. And so Corbett basically hoarded the title without fighting, and that's probably really frustrating to a guy like Joe Goddard, not really getting the opportunity in his prime to see what he could do against Corbett.
Okay, so Maher and Goddard fought first in 1892 and then twice more in 1898, 6 years later. What can you tell us about those three fights? Why do those stand out?
Right. Well, the 1892 between Goddard and Meyer, they would have at least put one of them a little bit ahead of the other as far as seemingly ahead of the other for who deserved a shot against Corbett. And Goddard won it fairly easy in the sense that Meyer seemed to be getting the best of him in the first couple of rounds, pounding him around a little bit, and then seemed to tire, and Goddard knocked him out in the third round. The reviews were sort of bad for both of them, that neither one of them have a chance against what were viewed as the two best fighters, which is James Corbett or Joe Kowinski. And but it really, in a sense, while Goddard would have looked like he was a step ahead of Meyer at that point, these things are, done with politics and all sorts of things. So Meyer had a very strong Irish fan base in America, and that probably helped him in a way that Goddard did not have the same sort of fan base. And they two other times in 1898, which would have been sort of the end of Meyer as a potential heavyweight champion. And Goddard got the best of him in a first-round knockout, which was sort of shocking because it was the end of Goddard's career, and he announced his retirement before the fight. He had actually, Goddard in the first round stepped on Meyer's foot and sort of landed a backwards punch to the face, but it was really stepping on the foot. Meyer tripped, landed face first on the ground, and that was it. He was knocked out. So it sort of really looked bad for Meyer. But in the third encounter, Meyer got the best of him and finally scored a knockout against Goddard to sort of end their trilogy.
Okay. That guy was named Joe Goddard. Here's another guy whose name was George Godfrey, very similar but very different fighter. Meyer was undefeated in 1893, and that led him to fight Godfrey, who was the colored heavyweight champion. Tell us about Godfrey.
Godfrey's one of my favorite fighters. I've covered him well and found bouts in some of my early archaeological digs. And Godfrey was a colored heavyweight champion during the 1880s. He fought from Boston, and one of the things Godfrey did that's really important is he became the first black heavyweight that, when John L. Sullivan was the undefeated champion, that many, particularly in Massachusetts and a little later spread throughout like New York, that felt that, hey, you know what, a black man should be allowed to fight for the unified heavyweight championship. Now, there was a colored heavyweight championship, which Godfrey had, but that was not really considered the same thing as the quote-unquote real heavyweight champion. But Godfrey, by simply, as a Christian man or a real gentleman, by simply fighting well and sort of brought the argument for the first time that, really a fighter a chance to fight for the heavyweight championship. Now, when Godfrey lost his title to Peter Jackson in 1888, Godfrey said pointedly, I don't mind losing because I lost to the best heavyweight in the world. So he made a real dig at Sullivan, and then Godfrey continued to fight afterwards, fight some of the best white heavyweights, and did terrific against them. He was a popular guy with the Boston crowd, so I think it was really helpful what he brought as far as the opportunity for a black man to fight for the unified white heavyweight championship.
Okay, so Peter Meyer fought George Godfrey in Boston, which was Godfrey's hometown. Why is that bout significant? Tell us about that one.
Well, Godfrey was simply a name by now. Now, he was a little bit later in the tail end of his career, so he wouldn't have been at his peak, but Godfrey was a name. It was in Boston. It was Godfrey's home turf. Godfrey himself was from one of those Canadian territories, but you would think with Godfrey being his home turf and a popular fighter, might have had a stronger fan base. But the Irish crowd showed up. The Irish crowd showed up for Meyer. And John L. Sullivan was there, and he was very openly for Meyer. And in the sixth round, Godfrey did well through the first 5 rounds, but Meyer got the best of him and knocked him out. Now, Godfrey didn't exactly receive a fair 10 count. John L. Sullivan ran into the ring, and spectators ran into the ring. But it appears that Godfrey probably would not have got up even if the count had been something other than short. And you realize Godfrey's fate a little bit when you read the newspaper coverage because they call him the darky and stuff like that. So again, Godfrey had to fight with a sort of dignity that people weren't really viewing him in a way as an equal or as a human being, and just really by being a Christian and being a great fighter, propelled all black fighters for a fairness and opportunity. But in that particular bout, Maher was able to take an older Godfrey out, knock him out in the 6th round, and it's a name. It's a big name, George Godfrey, and it started the talk of Maher being, if not really a heavyweight contender for the title at this point, he was certainly one of the better-known heavyweights at this time who would be somebody to think about as far as fighting for a championship.
So you say that Peter Maher suddenly found himself the favored fighter in a heavyweight title bout. How did that happen?
Well, it happened a bit unfairly. It's not really to Maher's discredit. James Corbett decided to retire, and in retirement, the build-up had been, what people had wanted to see was the middleweight champion, Bob Fitzsimmons, at this point, fight James Corbett. Before that, people would want to see the colored heavyweight champion, Peter Jackson, fight Corbett. But Corbett would always say he was going to fight and then not do it, say he was going to fight, then not do it. The police got involved and stopped a couple of these fights. So at this time, people really wanted to see Bob Fitzsimmons and James Corbett. But Corbett wouldn't let it happen. He hated Bob Fitzsimmons, and you just couldn't get him in the ring. So Corbett announces his retirement and then decides he's going to select his successor, which probably isn't very fair. And he chose Peter Maher, probably because of Maher's Irish heritage, and Steve O'Donnell, who was a sparring partner for both John L. Sullivan and Corbett. And the people that probably were burned a little bit in that is Bob Fitzsimmons himself, Peter Jackson still at this point, and Joe Kowinski. Those would have been for sure the 3 heavyweights that would have been listed ahead of both Maher and O'Donnell. But the reality is Corbett announced his retirement and said, okay, whoever wins between O'Donnell and Maher, that's the new heavyweight champion. That's who possesses my crown. And it was recognized at the time as the heavyweight championship fight.
Okay, well, what happened when they fought?
Well, they fought, and it was a pretty clean first-round knockout for Maher. O'Donnell did a lot of talking about how we would have done had he fought James Corbett, if Corbett would have fought him for the title, and he didn't look good against Maher. Maher rocked him early in the first round, and when O'Donnell went down, O'Donnell said from that point he didn't remember a thing after what happened. But his instincts, he managed to get up, got knocked down again, and he says that he doesn't remember anything other than he wasn't in pain, and then again his instincts told him to wait till the 10 count was mostly going. It's kind of amazing when you see boxers fight. They say he doesn't know where he is, and yet even though he doesn't know where he is, a lot of times a boxer will get up and still keep fighting, and that's what O'Donnell tried to do. And Mayer knocked him down for the 3rd and final time, and after 97 seconds, it was over, which was sort of astounding at that particular moment because a heavyweight championship fight simply didn't end that fast. So briefly, Maher had a reputation, and he's now the heavyweight champion. But there were now the scabs are starting to come out on Mayer because of the critics, at least, because there was sort of a feeling of unfairness. There was a feeling that Bob Fitzsimmons should have been one of the 2 people in the ring for the championship, and it really isn't Maher's fault that Corbett didn't select Fitzsimmons to fight amongst giving away his title the way he did. So Peter Maher is the heavyweight champion of the world.
Okay, so now Fitzsimmons is the number 1 contender, right? So Maher defends his title against Bob Fitzsimmons. Tell us about Fitzsimmons.
Well, Fitzsimmons was the former middleweight champion. He only lost a couple times. One of the times he took a dive against Jim Hall for a title bout. He said he took a dive because he needed the money, and that's what happens in boxing. But he was a terrific fighter who was smart. He was smaller than what we view as a heavyweight. He only fought at around 5'8" and 165 pounds. So it almost seems like, well, that's not really a heavyweight, but Fitzsimmons beat a lot of guys taller than him and stronger than him, and that Fitzsimmons had a hard punch. He wasn't that easy to hit and hurt, and a lot of guts, and enough that he was a very credible number 1 contender when he fought Maher. Now, they had fought once previously in 1892, and apparently Fitzsimmons dominated Maher really fairly easily. Then, in fact, it was a 12th round knockout for Fitzsimmons. And there didn't appear to be any injury on Fitzsimmons. Now, poor Maher got listed as a quitter, but I have a feeling that Maher just hadn't really tested his wind and stuff. He had been called a quitter against Goddard in their fight, and a quitter against Fitzsimmons, and those are really vicious turns, but they stick with you. And I think it's just that Maher really went for the quick knockout, and if he didn't get the quick knockout, he tired. So against Fitzsimmons the first time around, I think Fitzsimmons just basically let him tire himself out before knocking him out. And this time in the first round, Fitzsimmons was more aggressive, and Maher was being sort of hyper-aggressive, and to the point of when he got infighting with Fitzsimmons, he sort of threw an elbow or something, and the referee sort of pushed him back and said, don't do that. And then very quickly, Maher went after Fitzsimmons, and Fitzsimmons seemed to be ready for it, timed it, and just nailed him with a hook to the jaw. And Maher went down and couldn't get up. So Bob Fitzsimmons now was the heavyweight champion. This was only 95 seconds, even 2 seconds faster than the previous heavyweight title bout. And for most people, there was a satisfaction that Bob Fitzsimmons deserved to be the heavyweight champion at that point, even though Maher really is a very good heavyweight. It's just a matter of was he deserving to be heavyweight champion or not? Well, he was the heavyweight champion, and they fought in Mexico. It was just over the border with quite a few Mexican military units. Not that many spectators. They paid quite a bit of money for this small fight, and then a bridge was going to give way, so it was sort of chaotic conditions, a heavy wind and such, but nonetheless, fair and square. Bob Fitzsimmons is a better fighter and a better boxer, and that's what Maher was facing. They said when Maher faces a good boxer, he's going to be in trouble, and Bob Fitzsimmons was one of the best boxers, and in fact, he was in trouble, got knocked out in the first round.
Okay, so now tell us about one of your all-time favorite fighters, I think, Joe Kowinski.
Kowinski is one of my all-time favorite fighters. He's a quirky fighter. He fights at about 5'10"-ish and 175 pounds with a long length. He looks like a really tall, thin basketball player. And what's so quirky about him is his dad was a publisher, sort of an eccentric man, but he was able to get Dan Mendoza books, the English century. So Kowinski would read these books. He was one of the first boxers who was actually studying how to be a boxer based on Mendoza, and he went out against Corbett early in his career. Now, there's not a lot to say what happened in these fights other than the outcomes when Corbett knocked out Kowinski and such, but they're really famous from your area, incidentally, the Monterey area, so these are in that reasonable range. The quirky thing about Kowinski is that when he fought people that were approximately his own, like we have weights today. Now you have to fight within a designated weight. Now, if he fought today, he would be fighting probably against light heavyweights or such. And Kowinski was a good fighter then, but he was much more anxious to brawl. But when he fought heavyweights, guys much bigger and stronger, he simply boxed. And by using his boxing skills, which is a left jab that had a strange angle to it. He hit you at different angles with it. It was hard. It made a sound if you missed it, a sort of hissing, eerie sound. And he could relentlessly hit you with it. And it was very difficult to stop or block. And you get poked and poked and poked with this thing. And then he set up an ambush right. Now, when the 1910 fight of the century between James Jeffries, who was undefeated, the former champion, against Jack Johnson, the current heavyweight champion, unified champion, both of them stated at that time that the hardest they were ever hit was by Kowinski. And Kowinski had a 20-round draw against James Jeffries, who again hadn't lost at that point. And Kowinski hit Jeffries so hard in the 16th round that Jeffries' tooth was embedded in his lip. And the pain was so awful between rounds that it looked like Jeffries would have to quit until somebody took out a pocket knife and simply cut his tooth out before the next round, and blood squirted everywhere. And then when he fought Jack Johnson in 1901, Jack Johnson was much more of an offensive pugilist. And he's looking at Kowinski and thinking, I'm just going to go out there and knock this guy out. And started getting hit with this jab, hitting this jab, and he wasn't expecting it. And finally, Kowinski landed that ambush right, knocked Jack Johnson out early in his career. Both were arrested and sat in jail for about 3 weeks. And Jack Johnson said, I learned a lot. I learned everything about boxing from Joe Kowinski in that jail cell for those 3 weeks. Defense, patience, and Jack Johnson became a completely different fighter. So Kowinski was constantly in the framework of a heavyweight championship fight. He was the number 1 contender, number 2 contender, number 3 contender, and sort of hovered in that range throughout several years.
Okay, so how many did Maher fight Kowinski more than once?
Yeah, he did fight him more than once, but the probably the most important bout, which is sort of interesting the way these things work out, was in 1896, because Kowinski was the number one contender. He was really just one bout away. If he just could knock out or defeat Mayer, and he would probably get a shot against Bob Fitzsimmons for the heavyweight championship. That would have been a very popular heavyweight title bout. Fitzsimmons probably would have been the favorite against Kowinski, but it would have been a really interesting fight. And the only thing standing in front of that would have been Maher, which would look like a slugger versus boxer classic, and you would think would favor heavily Kowinski. And Kowinski in the first 5 rounds, Maher did knock Kowinski down. Maher just couldn't do anything at that jab. That jab's hitting you, and you can't stop it. And then by the 5th round, the end of the 5th round, Kowinski landed that really hard right that knocked out Johnson and really damaged Jeffries. And it was about the second or third time he landed it, but this one really wobbled Maher. It looked like he was going to go down, and he managed to hold up. And then round 6, Kowinski thought he's got the knockout. He's close to the knockout, so he got more aggressive with Maher. The fans have been taunting Kowinski from the beginning. There was a Maher crowd, Irish crowd, saying, "Come on, fight, you chicken, fight." And Kowinski was letting it get to him, so he decided to sort of slug it out with Maher, thinking he had him, tried to set up that right, and I knew it was coming, and flicked out a quick straight to nail Kowinski in the jaw, and Kowinski went down, and this time he didn't get up, so it was a pretty shocking upset at the time, stopped Kowinski from getting his title opportunity, and really gave Maher the most credibility he ever had in his career. It was a legitimate win. There was sort of talk of how he fought smarter, sort of like Tommy Morrison against George Foreman, but the actuality is I think Maher fought kind of the way he always fought. He just simply was managed to take these punches and continue, and finally Kowinski got a little bit careless, and to Maher's credit, he was able to still land a hard punch and stay on his feet and knock out Kowinski, and really again gave his reputation as not a fluke fighter, but someone one of the great ones. And then they did fight later on, I think another 6-rounder after both of them were past title contention. But before he knocked out Johnson, and that one Kowinski just said, I'm going to stick to the book and just out jab this guy and jab him to death, and took a fairly easy victory.
Did Kowinski and Fitzsimmons ever fight for a title?
No, they didn't get the opportunity because, unfortunately, by Kowinski losing to Maher, that they had fought once in sort of is it an exhibition, is it a real fight? Fitzsimmons got the best of Kowinski, but no, that would have been a wonderful matchup. And unfortunately, because of that, with Maher losing his title, James Corbett decided he didn't like the idea of Fitzsimmons being the champion. So because he didn't like the idea of Fitzsimmons being champion, and also kind of missing the kind of adulation that comes from being heavyweight champion, Corbett started hedging his bet, saying, "Well, I didn't really retire. How do you know I retired? I didn't retire. I'm the heavyweight champion, not Fitzsimmons," and sort of goading things along. So, but meanwhile, Fitzsimmons said, "I don't care what the hell the man says. He had the opportunity. Everything he could back out of it. And Corbett can go up the ranks like anybody else. Let him fight Maher. Let him fight Kowinski. Let him prove himself before he fights me." And all would have been sort of in that arena, but the person that kind of came up when Corbett took his first, not as a heavyweight champion, but out of retirement, he fought Tom Sharkey. Sharkey was popular in the San Francisco area, Sailor Tom Sharkey. And Sharkey had a wild 4-round draw against, he first fought an undefeated San Francisco pugilist and got the best of him. And he fought Corbett in 4 rounds. The crowd picked up Corbett a couple times and threw him on his head, and it was just a crazy sort of 4-round draw, so that gave Sharkey credibility and helped Sharkey end up landing the title fight against Fitzsimmons instead of Kowinski. And then unfortunately, it was a fraud fight that, in fact, Sharkey was in on it with his manager and the referee, Wyatt Earp, from the OK Corral fame, Doc Holly's buddy, and it was a rigged fight. And Fitzsimmons knew it was rigged against him, but there wasn't much he could do other than just completely outclass Sharkey and just kind of make it obvious. He even helped Sharkey before Sharkey fell down, helped him grab him. He helped pull him up from the ground, and by the time Wyatt Earp pulled his fake disqualification, the crowd was booing and acting crazy and fraud, and there's all this talk about Wyatt Earp. Man, that man was a chicken. He hauled ass out of there. He knew he was going to get killed. I mean, to rig a heavyweight championship bout was considered dirtier than anything in politics. For whatever reason, there was a purity sort of taken away. So Fitzsimmons now had lost to Sharkey, but no one wanted to call Sharkey heavyweight champion. It was really obvious it was a fraud. Eventually, Sharkey sued, and they admitted that it was a fraud. So what do you do? And so basically, Corbett was sort of reinstated as the heavyweight champion as long as he fought Fitzsimmons. And so they finally had the fight of the century, of the 19th century. And Corbett did knock Fitzsimmons down in the 6th round, and in the 14th round, Fitzsimmons, with a body punch, knocked out Corbett. So he was, again, the heavyweight champion for the second time, not the first. But by saying, the first time Bob Fitzsimmons is the heavyweight champion, and Corbett never really retired, though he did, somehow it becomes questionable, was Maher ever the heavyweight champion? So clearly he was. Corbett did retire, and Fitzsimmons, Maher was a heavyweight title bout. Fans have to accept that a fight was rigged, and what do you do when something's rigged? It's sort of unfortunate for everyone. At least the 1919 World Series, nobody questions the Cincinnati Reds won. It's just sort of stained, but they weren't involved in any sort of fraud. Bob Fitzsimmons wasn't involved in any sort of fraud, but that's what happens in sports sometimes. And Maher was sort of the victim of a fraud that he wasn't a part of.
Okay, so Maher and Sharkey were arrested for disorderly conduct. Is that right?
Yes, the two Irishmen did actually fight a bout and in New York City, and it was actually a really anticipated fight. I mean, there were two big names at the time, and for the first 5 rounds it was a little bit dull. The referee was Joe Kowinski, and Kowinski had fought Sharkey. Now, Sharkey was the dirtiest son of a bitch probably ever to be in the ring. Makes Mike Tyson fighting Evander Holyfield's ear, makes him a choir boy. Sharkey was relentless in being sort of dirty in the way he did things. So when he fought Kowinski, he had choked Kowinski in the ring. Kowinski was getting the best of him, and he grabbed the man, threw him to the ground, and started choking him, and started pushing him outside the ring. So now Kowinski's the referee, and he knows all about Sharkey's antics. And so when Sharkey scored a 6th round knockdown of Maher, now technically at the time you could hover over the fighter, and when the fighter, any part of his knee left the ground, you could hit him. But Kowinski stating later that he was a little concerned what Maher might do. Would the guy knee him? Would he spit on him? Would he kick him? Who knows what with Sharkey? Kowinski ordered Sharkey back. So Sharkey stepped back for a few seconds, allowing Maher to get up, and then Sharkey thought, what the hell am I standing here for? Who the fuck is Kowinski? So he charges at Maher. So Maher survives the round, but there's a little bit of questions whether that was right or wrong protocol. And Kowinski made a decision. And then in the following round, Maher knocked Sharkey down. Now, Sharkey got up right away and started rushing at Maher and grabbed him in a clinch. And at that point, Maher was the stronger of the two, so Maher started bullying Sharkey back and pounding him with body punches. The bell rang. Kowinski couldn't separate the fighters. Neither of the fighters would stop. And so a sort of bedlam took place. But eventually Kowinski was able to separate them. So Maher is walking back to his corner, and Sharkey charges at the man and hits him. And then he hits him a second time. And now Maher's shocked, so Maher turns around and hits Sharkey, and the Sharkey hits him again. They start throwing more punches at each other. People are entering the ring. The police enter the ring. Kowinski chaos is broken loose, and both fighters are arrested for disorderly conduct. The fans loved it. The fans sort of cheered the two fighters as they were being hauled off to jail. A crowd of 500 just to see him go to jail, and then magistrate, after a night in jail, the magistrate decided, somebody took the stand, and an officer that was a witness said, well, they were punching each other and knocking each other down. That looks like a prize fight to me, which is illegal. And the magistrate said, well, I don't know about that. It's kind of one of those things that let him go, and this is what happened too. He said, well, people went there to see this spectacle. The two men were both, they weren't being forced to do anything against their will. Then I guess the judge just decided he didn't like the law, so he said, all right, both of you, you're released. So it was just one of those things about boxing in general is that it was illegal, but a lot of people didn't think it should be illegal, and so the New York Times, or back in if you're in England, the London Times, or I guess it's just called the Times there, would write how could you have something that's illegal blatantly in front of people and not do anything about it? But the reality is judges were fans of boxing too, and the police officers were fans of boxing, and so they thought it was a stupid law that it was illegal, and so they just arrested him and let him go the next day. And it was fairly common, and that's what happened with Sharkey and Meyer.
Okay, so 1899, another Irishman comes on the scene, a guy named Mike Morrissey. Tell us a little bit about his story.
Well, he's from Tipperary, Ireland. It's a long way to Tipperary. It's a long way to go. But I made that the center of my story. That's on Ringside Boxing Show and Grueling Truth. And it's because Morrissey had nothing really substantial as far as a record. People hadn't really seen him fight in America. But he had a New York City promoter, Dwyer, P.J. Dwyer, who was the Brooklyn Jockey President. And the guy put up some money and said, my guy's ready to fight James Jeffries, the undefeated James Jeffries, for the heavyweight championship. And just through simply putting his name in the newspaper and saying the guy was worthy of the heavyweight title bout, he got Jeffries' attention. Jeffries says, if they have money, if they're willing to put up money, I'll fight him for the title. So Morrissey still had to have some sort of credible win, and it looked like Meyer, after getting knocked out in the first round by Goddard, was a real easy pickings, and a popular Irishman, probably the most popular Irishman at the time, and it looked like he was sort of on the decline of his career, so it looked like, if you fight Meyer, like Meyer fought Godfrey, and kind of catch him at the tail end of his career, it's a credible victory to launch him against James Jeffries. And the problem is, sometimes when you watch boxing, I know you hear Mayweather and stuff, that any punk off the street could fight these guys. Well, that turns out not to be true. And that while Peter Meyer may have a reputation as a slugger and not really a boxer, the man could box. And when a person who hasn't boxed goes against a guy with so much experience, and it's sort of frightening. I think you forget that when these guys they're really large in person, and they give you a mean, evil look. And Mike Morrissey was trembling when he actually had to fight Meyer. And that it turned out that even though Meyer was fighting what he thought was a younger guy, hand speed advantage, all these advantages, the reality is he's all beat up looking. Meyer has the cauliflower ears and the nose in the wrong direction, but he looks like a mean son of a bitch. And Mike Morrissey, when all is said and done, he's scared to death of this guy. And Meyer saw and sensed that and thought, oh, good, for Meyer it was a career. It really was that, hey, I got to make money. He had a pretty actress for a wife, and there's bills to be paid, so this is his job. And so if he could scare this guy to death before they actually fought, that's great. And so they start. The bell rang. Morrissey didn't even want to go to the center of the ring, and Meyer took him out with 2 punches. Morrissey didn't want to get up, and that was it. Another first-round knockout. And again, I made it the centerpiece of my story because Meyer, because he's not in the same class as maybe a John L. Sullivan or James Crawford or Bob Fitzsimmons or even a James Jeffries, there's almost a tendency to discredit him as a heavyweight completely when maybe if he wasn't at the class of those guys, he was still a hell of a good heavyweight, and he was a champion. And that don't underestimate that just because, if you're the 20th best lawyer in America, my God, you're a star. But if you're the 20th best heavyweight, you're considered a bum. So Peter Meyer was no bum, and that's what happened when a guy thought he could take on a former heavyweight champion and realized, shit, this guy's big and scary looking, and you know what? When he hits me, I ain't getting up. So that's why I sort of made it the centerpiece of my story. Meyer was a badass Irishman fighter, and that's how he should be remembered, and a former heavyweight champion. So that's sort of why I made it the centerpiece of the story.
Hey, did something unusual happen with Morrissey while his gloves were being laced?
Oh, just that he was trembling. The journalists were noticing this. I mean, they were taking this seriously, the fight, because Morrissey's handlers have been putting him into wire. They put him in the newspaper in New York City so much, so you kept reading about this guy. A little bit like Peter McNeely when he fought Mike Tyson. Well, if you remember, that really McNeely had no business fighting a guy like Mike Tyson. But you look at his record; it's a 29-1. You kept hearing about him, what a tough Irishman guy he was, and sort of if you hype a guy enough, you think maybe they maybe they have some credibility. And of course, Peter McNeely wasn't afraid, but his handlers were afraid for him because he was so quickly outclassed by Mike Tyson. And so when people hear about the hype for a guy like a Mike Morrissey, you think, hey, this guy must be really credible, because otherwise, why would he be in the newspapers? Not really realizing that, again, money can get you in the newspapers. So, yeah, the guy was trembling. He was scared. And a guy like Peter Meyer thought, oh, good, if this guy's scared now, I'm going to give him real mean looks and make him more scared. So that's what the journalists were really noting, because it's very unusual. There was a guy that fought James Jeffries who cried in the first round after he got knocked down, and sometimes the hype would get a person to a heavyweight championship bout or to a near heavyweight championship bout. But the problem is, if you're fighting a legit heavyweight and it's a fair fight, you might be like Mike Morrissey. You might be a lot more scared than you think than when you're watching on television and calling somebody a bum.
You bring up Peter McNeely, who was on our show several years ago, and he was just great talking about that Tyson fight. And he gave boxing one of the most memorable boxing quotes from a press conference I can possibly remember, and I think you can probably still find it on YouTube. He's mad at the disrespect he's getting before the fight, and he said, if any of you guys don't think that I got a chance to beat Mike Tyson, y'all got a big dump in your drawers.
Well, that's true. Even the greatest of all time, Muhammad Ali, that somehow, after his career was over, somehow developed a reputation that he was maybe fast, but not really a hard puncher for some reason. So when Mike Tyson was actually undefeated at his peak, there were so many that said Muhammad Ali wouldn't have a chance because he doesn't hit hard and stuff. And George Foreman, who lost to Muhammad Ali, said, if anyone thinks Muhammad Ali didn't hit hard, it's because you never got hit by him.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Ali could punch, absolutely, man. And the thing is, you never saw it coming because he was so friggin' fast. So,
right.
Hey, always interesting stuff from Christopher James Shelton, our historian. Chris, great job as always, and thanks so much for telling us another amazing tale on the Ringside Boxing Show.
Thank you. And can I throw a hello to my girlfriend, Colleen Rose Farrell, who's Irish and sitting here while I'm doing the interview?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello to her. So thanks, Chris, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay, Christopher James Shelton on the Ringside Boxing Show. Hey, do you like this podcast? Do us a solid and tell other boxing fans about the Ringside Boxing Show. Post us on your social media platforms and help us grow. Also, we invite you to discover the #1 website in the world for daily boxing news. We update ringsideboxingshow.com 365 days a year with the hottest and most interesting stories you're going to find every day. If you haven't found us yet, you got something to do right this minute. Check us out right now, and you will be amazed, guaranteed. ringsideboxingshow.com. We want to thank our expert analysts, Travis Hartman, Rizwan Zahid, and John J. Risponti for their weekly contributions to this show, as well as our outstanding British correspondent, Paul McLaughlin. And another huge thanks to today's featured guest, guy who's been with us for more than a decade, the inimitable Christopher James Shelton, boxing historian extraordinaire. And, of course, we thank you, Ringside Nation, for being a part of our worldwide audience again today. Keep your chin tucked, and we'll talk to you again next week on the Ringside Boxing Show.
Well, it's a great day for me to whoop somebody's ass. It's a bad day, so you better get off of my back. You might get cold cocked if you cross my path. It's a great day for me to whoop somebody.